All right, welcome back to our podcast, Tales from the Other Side, Stories of Grace. And today I'm so excited to introduce to you some of my new friends. Now, in the past, I've been talking to some older friends, like friends, not older, like a lot older than you guys, but friends that I've known for a long time. You guys, on the other hand, I've only known for a little bit. And your story is fantastic. It's unbelievable. It's hard. I think it's all the emotions. And I'm so excited to have you here today. But before we start, let's actually start with prayer, because this is hard stuff, you know. And I think it would just be better for all of us just kind of let the Holy Spirit kind of settle, you know, because in some of the other stories, there's not as much pushback that you guys actually get, and the darkness that you guys have been in and come out of is different than some of the darkness that others have been in. So before I introduce you guys to our audience, can I pray for us? Would that be all right?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. God, we love you. We thank you so much for your grace and your mercy. And long before we ever choose you, you chose us. And I'm so thankful for how you look after us. I'm so thankful for Dallin, so thankful for Karli, thankful for their whole family, thankful for their story. But more importantly, I'm thankful for your grace and your mercy, and how you go before us, how you love us, how you fight battles for us. When we're uncertain, you're there for us. Even in our own self-confidence, you still reign supreme and take care of us. And God, I pray that as we speak today, that you would just settle our nerves, that you would give us truth, and that you would use this story to open the minds and hearts that others who have been blinded by the God of this world would actually come to terms with who you are and your saving grace. So be about our conversation today. Do a great work here on this little simple podcast, and we give you all the praise. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so here I am with two friends from Utah, and we're actually today going to talk about your journey out of Mormonism. And so I want to say that from the front side. As I was praying, I did mention your names, Dallin and Karli. It's not Dallin, as we would say here in the South. It's Dallin. And you guys are out of Utah. You got a beautiful family. I met you just probably a year or so. It's around that time frame. Roughly a year, maybe a little less. And you got a fantastic story, a hard story, and I want you to share it today. Now, for all those that are listening, especially those that live around here in our podcast, probably not from where you guys are from, the whole understanding of Mormonism is the basics of it, the more intricate part of it, we're not very familiar with. And so I want to say that on the front end, because today we really want to kind of share your story, like where you are, where you're from. And then you guys have agreed to come back and do like part 2, part 3, where we really dive into it and you educate us on what you were taught and now what you found truth to, and how you're trying to help others who still believe the way you formerly did. So all that to say, Dallin and Karli, I'm thankful to have you guys.
Thanks for having us.
So tell us a little bit about you guys. Who are you? Where are you from? How long you been married? All that good stuff.
Yeah, so we are from Utah. We lived there, at least I lived in and around Utah most of my life. But that's where we met. We met going to school there. We met in a Mormon church.
Okay.
And got married in that church and all of that. But we have 3 kids. We have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. All very busy.
And you still have your sanity.
Not really.
We're barely holding on to it. Yeah.
Oh,
barely
man.
holding on.
Beautiful.
But yeah, we left Utah just over a year ago.
Okay.
And we'll kind of tell a little bit about what led to that. But I guess a little bit of backstory about us. We were raised in the Mormon church from the time that we were both young. My dad had been raised in it, but had stopped believing, around the time before I was born. And shortly, when I was about 5 years old, my mom she went on a search trying to find what religion or church she wanted to join, and ended up stumbling upon Mormonism. My dad came back to the church. My mom got baptized. And from the age of about 5, I was raised in the church.
I would imagine that's probably pretty easy there in Utah to find a Mormon church.
Yeah.
Because
they're on every street corner.
Yeah.
Like around here, now that you live in East Tennessee, there's Baptist churches, Methodist churches, Presbyterian Church of Christ. Those are on every street corner.
Mm-hmm.
You rarely see a Mormon church or whatever.
Yep.
But in Utah, and what part of Utah are you guys from?
We met in northern Utah. We were going to school in Orem.
Okay.
At Utah Valley University, and then we really didn't like it up there. The weather, and it's like the centralized Mormon hub, and I actually was raised mostly in Arizona, and so any Mormon would tell you this: like the church and the culture is very different if you're in Utah or if you're out of it. Mm-hmm. So Mormons in Utah are actually pretty different than Mormons outside of Utah. So we had different
Utah,
upbringings.
just side note, before we dive into this thing, I've been to Utah and I love it. It's beautiful, man.
Just stay out of the churches and you'll be fine.
Well, here's a funny thing now. In full confession, I did go in Salt Lake City. I went on a little tour. And the Mormon church sets up down there. Met some really nice people, but
they'll be really nice.
I didn't stay long, basically because of my accent, they couldn't understand me. But it's beautiful country.
Yeah, and it's very different. So we met there, and we had our first 2 kids there, and what was it, like 2020 or 2021? We felt called, like we didn't want to be in northern Utah anymore. We wanted to go down south, so we moved to St. George. 2020, I think.
It's a town that you would pass through to go to
Zion
Zion
like
National Park.
Zion National Park,
really
Red
beautiful.
Rock Desert. It's a very different kind of beautiful. But so that's where kind of like most of our story happened.
And that's where you moved to.
We were there for 2.5 years.
So you had been in the Mormon church down since you were like 5. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting because your dad was in and then it was out.
And then back in.
And then back in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of like what's the old movie? Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in, right?
Yeah,
So he's back in. Karli, how long were you in the Mormon church?
So my dad was born and raised, like my dad's line, if you know anything about Mormon history, like the pioneers trekked with hand carts from Missouri to Utah in like the 1840s. And like that's my dad's family history.
Wow.
But my mom, her parents divorced when she was little, and when she was about 9, her mom joined the church, and so did she. And so her mom and she were raised in the church from that point, but her dad was never part of it. And so we had a little bit of, we call them like non-members, our family, and it was a little bit different. And of course we were in Arizona where it's not highly concentrated with Mormons, and people seem to be a little more open-minded and kinder. Like in Utah, it can be pretty divisive because sometimes Mormons,
chamber.
like sometimes members of the Mormon church are scared to talk to people who are not part of it, or scared to let their kids be friends with kids who aren't part of the church because they're going to be bad influences or pull them away from the church. But if you're outside of Utah, it's not that divisive because most of your community is not going to be members, and so you are going to talk to more people.
I think one of the interesting things that you just said there is you were referencing Arizona as we get into your story, because I know a little bit of your story, is you use the word kinder. Outside of the central hub, Utah itself, where I would imagine most of the population, if they are religious, are Mormons.
Yeah. About 70%, I believe. Right?
Wow. That's so 7 out of 10 people you bump into is going to be Mormon, but when you're outside of that, there's a little bit less pushy or maybe a little more understanding. But inside where you guys were and where your story actually starts to take shape, that unkindness is experienced, and I think that's what's crazy to me. Let me ask a question before we go any further. And I know you guys are a little bit nervous, but you're dealing with me, and my ADD's crazy. So I know y'all got a plan. I know y'all have a plan, like where we're going to go with this story, but who knows where we're going to end up. And we're going to tell this whole story over multiple things. But how old are you all?
I'm 31.
I'm 30.
Unbelievable, and I think that's important. Like I haven't asked everybody that I've met with how old they are, but I think because of where you are in life, what you're going through. You're a young mom. You're raising 3 beautiful kids. I've been around them. You've been around my kids. They're rambunctious. I mean, they're all kiddos. You know what I mean? And you guys are married for how long?
Almost, was it 8 years now?
Yeah, we're 8.5 years. Yeah.
And I want to set the stage because in a normal setting, we take young 30-year-olds, 8 years married, 3 kids that are stair-step. You would need, it would seem, especially around here where family's big, Utah's family's big, the support, right? And over time, I think what we're going to see is that's been ripped away, unfortunately, because of just the unkindness and the force of wanting to make sure you believe what you're supposed to believe. And it's unbelievable because when we start talking about grace, it's going to be a huge part of the focus of where you are. So here we are, 5 years old, you're in the church. Dad's been sucked back in, mom's in. You come from a long line of cart pulling pilgrims to the Utah Mormonism. Like that's deep rooted. Like we're not just talking about fly by night. We're talking about deep rooted generations.
Very deep, yeah.
Then what happens?
So,
well, I think you should go over some of the core beliefs that we had been taught first.
Okay. Yeah. fine.
yeah.
And why we started to question them.
Yeah, that's cool. But you all get married.
Yeah.
And so you're back in Utah. You moved to St. George.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're in the Mormon church. You're rocking on. You just had your second baby? Third.
Yeah.
All right. It's after 2020-ish, around in there. And you start asking questions. But those questions are concerning some beliefs. And what are those beliefs?
So I guess just a little bit, just a tiny bit more backstory.
Yeah.
To show how in it we were,
Yeah.
how devout we were.
Yeah.
The number one accusation of members who leave the Mormon church are, well, they never really had a testimony, or else they wouldn't have left. And I completely detest that because both of us served missions. She served a 1.5-year mission. I served a 2-year mission. That's what the men and women each serve. We are fully devout. I was, on a Kool-Aid drip, breathing it. And
it was your life.
It was everything.
Yeah.
My entire identity, everything I believed about God, everything I believed about the world, the way I saw the world, the way I perceived myself, my value, my future, my salvation, the way that I wanted to parent, the way that I wanted to raise my kids. I mean, everything was 100%. We were 100% devoted. Almost to, if you were to ask anyone who knew me at the time, I was kind of obnoxious about it. Like I was too Mormon for even the most Mormons.
So you were
know what
extreme.
I was very extreme.
Very perfectionist. And it's because the core belief, like the core doctrine of Mormonism is like you have to be worthy to go to their temple. So like, you'll see church buildings on every corner, right? But the temple, like the huge, beautiful white buildings, that's different. So only worthy members can go there. And that's where they say they do saving ordinances. So there's other ordinances or rituals that you would do there that they say that's like you have to have those to be able to go to heaven.
But you got to be living a certain life just to even get in the door.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, before we even get in the ordinances, it's like you can't even get in because you're not. So so there's this subconscious like to be extreme because you're always wanting to measure up, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there literally is a checkbox list of what's your worthiness. Like, of course, you can't question the prophet. Like, do you fully sustain and believe in the prophet?
I think that's kind of a cool rule. We might implement that. No questions, please.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
What else? Oh, so there's like some principle called the word of wisdom. So we're not allowed to drink alcohol, tea, or coffee.
Tea or coffee too?
Yeah. So if you drink coffee,
Especially.
you're not.
So around here, around here, you are allowed to drink alcohol, but those that don't partake, they drink sweet tea. So like you would have cut out
Yeah,
the
you can't
whole
have
state
sweet
of
tea
Tennessee
either.
would
Yeah.
just be in the ocean somewhere, right?
Yeah, that's why instead of coffee shops all over Utah, you see a coffee shop on every corner.
Yeah.
Outside of Utah, inside of Utah, you see like soda shops, like almost like mocktail shops where you go and you have your Mountain Dew, that already has 100, grams of sugar, and then you add
3 different flavor syrups.
Yeah, tons of different syrups and more sugar to it. So it's really big in Utah. I've always been a huge Mountain Dew guy.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be living in the birthplace of Mountain Dew.
Yeah. Come on.
But anyways, a little bit of a tangent there. But
that's cool.
We say all of this to set a backstory and also to explain how devout we really were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we never questioned the prophet. I never, my whole life, questioned the prophet. You're expected to 100% listen to, obey, and believe him. He speaks for God. Therefore, as he is speaking as a prophet, you are listening to the words of God.
We're told
That's
that
how
he
you're
literally
supposed to admonish the prophet.
Yeah, we're literally told that he speaks to God.
Okay.
And that he
Like
communes
face
on
to
his
face.
behalf.
Yeah.
right.
And so if the prophet literally stood up in a setting, where he was speaking to the church and he told everybody to, I don't know. Name extreme,
sell your
thing
cars
here.
and buy horses.
No, a
and
real
whatever.
example.
Yeah.
A real example is so every 6 months they do a general conference where they all go to this huge conference center and it's broadcast across the world. And there was literally a conference talk with some other apostle or leader give this talk, and he's like, I was in a meeting with President Nelson, the prophet, and I saw him drink a bottled water, and then he twisted it up, crunched it up, and put the cap on and put it in the recycling. And I think we should all follow that example.
There was a whole conference talk
and then
based
it's
on crunching your water bottles.
The
like
prophet
the
crunches the bottle, so we should do that too.
I should really probably stop crunching my water bottles. I've always done that.
No, I think it's good, man. Hey, God told that guy to tell you guys to do that.
He did.
Yeah.
So weird.
Saving the planet.
Yeah,
One bottle at a time.
Yeah, I guess.
But anyway, so rewinding or fast forwarding to the question you asked. So we were living in St. George. Part of the reason we moved to St. George is because Utah, just like most other places in 2020, lost its mind. They lost their mind. Everybody was so overcautious, freaked out. The governor was saying if you gather, if more than 5 people unrelated gather in one setting, you can be fined up to $10,000. And all these things are happening around COVID. And down in St. George, St. George is referred to as Utah's Dixie. It's the south of Utah.
All right.
And so down in St. George, every's like, I'm not doing that.
Don't tread
They're a lot
on
more
me.
conservative.
You don't tread on me.
Yeah.
And so that's where we felt at home. So we moved down there. But really 2020 was the very first time that we ever started to notice the church contradicting its values. What we had been raised to believe our whole lives that the church would do in the latter days, because it's all about the latter days with Mormons. They say that the Constitution one day will hang by a thread, and the priesthood of the church, of the Mormon church, will save the Constitution.
Oh, that's another important thing about the Mormon doctrine.
The Constitution of the United States.
The
Yes.
Constitution of
Yeah.
the United
So
States.
Mormonism is actually going to save it at some point.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool.
But the really big key here is that in 2020, all of a sudden the Constitution didn't matter. Churches get shut down, no problem. We'll shut down too.
They just shut down too.
There was no pressure. It didn't seem like the church was even trying to lobby, on behalf of being able to gather. It was just totally like, yeah, this is what we do now. Now all of a sudden the temple doesn't matter. Now all of a sudden going to church every Sunday, which is a commandment of the Lord. You have to go to church every Sunday. You have to take the sacrament worthily, their communion, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden none of that mattered anymore, and we'll catch you in a few months when all of this passes.
Even though the Mormon church, in the truth of the law, whatever, is going to, save the Constitution, save America. It folded when America lost its mind, or when the world lost its mind. Really.
Even though the
It
Mormon
followed suit.
church, even though the Mormon church has always been known to be like the renegade outlaw church of America.
Yeah.
They've
from the
always
beginning.
been all about freedom and very conservative values. And then all of a sudden, the last couple of years, they just kept pushing out all these PR emails we trust our government leaders. Everybody,
say any,
I'm not going to say
censor
that.
words.
I won't. But go get all the things, everything the government's telling you to do, you should go do it. And we're like, this is
Really?
not what
Yeah.
It
I
was
was
crazy.
raised believing the church stood for.
It really bothered me because, again, it contradicted everything I was raised to believe the church was and everything the church would do when what was happening would happen.
Yeah, because it kind of put that in perspective. Overnight, the government had taken away your freedom to worship, where you worship, how you worship, the whole thing, it shut it all. And the church just followed suit with that and just said, okay, we'll go along with this, rather than what you have been taught, where the church is going to stand. And it's going to, whether it's right with what the government tells us to do or it doesn't, we're going to stand on this truth. And so what you're watching before your very eyes is that very bold statement go, you know what? We've thought about it, and just stay at home.
It's a lot easier to just go with the flow.
Yeah. So that opens your eyes.
Yeah. And it didn't take long for us
that's what it was.
Yeah. Well, and it didn't take long for us to start to realize, sorry, I'm hogging the mic.
Nah.
But it didn't take long for us to start to realize that, that isn't the only area that the church was doing that. We started to realize all the different things that the church was investing in, but that was what sparked it.
Yeah. So I think that's like Dallin said, like both of us, we had never questioned anything. And what he mentioned about the priesthood, for those who wouldn't know anything about Mormonism, like the church believes that they are the only church on the face of the earth that has the true authority of God,
and
of the
fullness
priesthood.
Of his gospel.
And so like only Mormon baptism is valid because only Mormon men have the priesthood authority of God.
Given to them by John the Baptist as a heavenly messenger.
Okay.
That's a whole,
Which I've got to say this, I just want to drop this in here. We'll come back to it at some point. And I don't want to use this word, just out of context, but around here, you hear a lot of people talk about Mormonism being possibly a cult, okay? And so you start saying these things, we're the only, you can only get in this way. And so it starts...
Can't question.
Yeah, it starts lining up with a cult really quick. But interesting thing that y'all told me just off mic earlier, and I put it in the back of my... Now that you're here and walking in the Christian faith, you've even been accused of now being in a cult.
Yes.
By a cult. So to me, like, it makes my hands like what is happening? You know what I mean? So that's so interesting to me. So
it is.
You've got all these things going on. So then what happens?
Okay. So finally, for like the first 2 years of COVID, we were just feeling uneasy, but we still never really questioned anything until like the Spirit had just put it on my heart, like a true prophet. Like they say that President Nelson is like a prophet, like Noah or Moses or
Okay, so let's make sure for our listeners, President Nelson is like the head prophet of the Mormon Church.
The prophet of the world.
He's
like
the OG.
Yeah.
He's the OG.
Yes. Okay. And so like he is just like Moses or
Really?
More important, actually, is what they teach. The living prophet is more important than any prophet who's come before.
Yeah. If anything comes out of a prophet's mouth that's contradictory, it's because the living prophet's more important than a dead one.
Yeah. So the ones
God's
before, they were good and they spoke the truth and they did all that. So now the new one, who happens to be this guy, if he says anything that contradicts that, that's because he's in the here and now and God's changed his mind and
doctrine
you
can
go
change.
with this.
Yeah.
In fact, the current prophet completely changed everything about the religion, including you guys probably remember 15 years ago or so, the I'm a Mormon ads that were all over social media, all over, TV. We used to embrace the nickname Mormon. That's not the name of the church. The name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? But he changed it and said, you're not allowed to, we're not supposed to call, Satan wins, he said, when we give in to the nickname Mormon. So therefore we have to refer to it as the full title, not LDS, not Mormon, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he completely rewrote the entire identity of the church, really.
Yeah. And everyone just follows suit like, oh, you're right. We should never say Mormon. It's like, do you not realize that you've been called Mormon for like 180 years?
Yeah.
Anyways.
Embraced by every prophet before this one. But anyways.
Yeah. So
no, I like it. I mean, because I'm learning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's so much to
like
cover.
I am learning and now you see why we're going to have to break this up over multiple because it's like you're downloading information with the secret codes that we have never known here. You know what I mean? But you were living. It was normal for you guys.
Yeah. It was everything.
And I mean, it was the extreme nature of who you are. For us, it's like, what? You know, because we only get like around, you know, if you're outside of the church, you only get a snapshot. Like I knew about missions. I knew you had a prophet. You know, I knew those kind of things. You know, I've seen the beautiful temples. I mean, gorgeous.
They're fine sanctuaries.
Yeah, yeah. And the little icons on top and all the different things, like some of that. But this is all. Just keep going, girl. I mean, drop
so
it
this
on
is
us.
the turning point.
Okay, here it
Because we
comes.
had felt uneasy during COVID, but didn't actually question it until the Spirit had put it on my heart that a true prophet of God, you know, if he's just like a biblical prophet, he would never go and tell everyone to go get a pharmaceutical or like any sort of like medical procedure. He would not go and tell everyone you have to do this. God said so. Like if you want to go get the experimental jab, that's fine. That's a personal choice.
You're talking about the COVID shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying not to use
say it to get
maybe it's
censored on
not
YouTube.
sensitive.
Oh,
I
does
don't
it
know.
get censored?
Oh yeah.
Well, we may have to
Sometimes
take
they
that
do.
out.
That out.
That's not going to make it. So yes, okay. So an antidote.
Yeah. So it's like if you want to get that, that's fine. That's a personal choice. You can pray on that. But the Spirit told me like a true prophet would never go tell everyone they have to do that, and that's the will of God.
Right.
You know. And then he did. So he sent out a worldwide email to every member in the world saying, "We urge everyone to go get the vaccine, and we trust."
Saying it now. Okay.
Well, he said it. we urge everyone to go get the shot, and we trust our government leaders. We trust, you know, all these things, and he called it a literal godsend from God, and we're like, if people want to do that, that's fine, but God is not telling every single person to go do that.
Wow.
And
You know what's crazy?
And we didn't immediately question it, right? We actually, when we first heard it, we were like, shoot, maybe we were wrong.
Yeah.
We had to take it back to the drawing board
Like some
because
people-
we couldn't question the prophet.
yeah, some people might throw it out like, oh, okay, he's a false prophet, all this stuff, like throw it out immediately. We took
Some
a
people
couple
did do
months.
that?
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah. But like we took time to process it and like chew on it. Like, what does this mean?
You know, I want to just stop this for that train of thought for just a second. And this is something that I'm thinking here while you're talking. Okay. As we think about in the Christian church evangelism and sharing the gospel with people, we ask the Holy Spirit to move, you know, Jesus, do your thing, open the minds of those who are blind to faith, to grace, to mercy. And a lot of times we spend so much time, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but we spend so much time on the nuances, on this theology and this doctrine and this thing, because, you know, if I ever have a chance, I'm going to share this with you, and that's what's going to be the thing that God uses. In your all story, this is what blows my mind. It was none of that opened your eyes. It was the standard belief system that you followed as the church and the leader, but it came down to your belief in the church as a whole and how it stood against things that would, from the government or whoever, that would impose upon the church and your belief system. And it was the overall, it wasn't the faith, it wasn't the theology, it was
Crazy
just the
doctrines.
core, it was just the core belief of this is who we belong to and this is what we stand for.
Medical and religious freedom is what it came down to for me.
Yeah, and that, to me, that's crazy. And I think it's just absolutely phenomenal of how God knows how to speak your language.
He does.
Yeah.
Well,
Like,
and
you know what? He knew what was going to get you.
yeah.
Yeah, he knew that don't tread on me pear down there raising those babies. Wait till they get a load of this.
Yeah.
You know
Well,
what I
and
mean?
there are a ton of people who woke up the same way we did.
Unbelievable.
But the reason it happened that way is because being raised in the church, like, and this isn't the same story for our siblings. We both have, and he's got 5 brothers, I got 2 brothers, and they left the church for different reasons. And 80% of the people who leave the church go agnostic or atheist.
Okay.
But like our story, like both of us since a very young age, like we were completely devoted to the church because we loved God. Like we knew God like since a young age, and we just wanted to make God happy and serve God our whole lives. But the unfortunate part was that in the Mormon church, we were taught that the church is synonymous with God. So the only thing we knew about God was the Mormon version. But then after this all happened, we decided to be a little humble and be like, okay, God, I've been taught that this is one true church. This is your church, your only true church on earth. If I'm wrong about something, please show me.
But you know, when you say that, in the way you put that, it makes so much sense that 80% that would leave the church would become agnostic or atheist because their whole life, the church and God, the church and the prophet, it was one.
Yeah.
So if you walk out on one, you've walked out on the whole thing.
Yeah. And you're indoctrinated to think that all these other churches are just wrong too. So
the Book of Mormon, or at least the leader's interpretation of the Book of Mormon, what they teach from what the Book of Mormon says, is that the churches outside of Mormonism are literally called in the Book of Mormon the whore of all the earth.
The whore?
The whore of all the earth.
It says there's two churches, the Church of God and the Church of the Devil.
Yes. And they're the church of God, and everyone else is deceived by the devil.
So that would be... My church membership would be in the whore of all the earth. Especially because... I get an asterisk?
now let me tell you what really comes down to this. So it's crazy. So I was raised truly believing that the idea of drums in church was the most abominable thing in the world.
Really?
Like, it's so irreverent. Wearing a cross is so irreverent because you're wearing the thing that took his life.
Yeah.
It would be like, wearing the weapon of somebody that you love who had been,
Like a drunk driver death and then wearing a car.
Exactly.
Okay,
it's so, but also I was raised to believe that if I ever got within even the parking lot of a Christian church, that everyone is going to sniff me out. Like, Christians know how to sniff out a Mormon. And as soon as you walk in, they're going to start trying to convince you that your life or that your beliefs are all wrong, convince you that the Book of Mormon isn't true, and try and convert you to this dark
I could actually help whoever made you feel that way. We don't sniff you out. We just see your name tag. We see your name tag. When we see the name tag, we're like, that dude or dudette, whatever. So, anyways, I digress and make a joke.
But anyways, sorry to
we're not
take
that good at snippers.
Sorry to take that rabbit hole.
No, I like it.
I really always believed. I was so scared to ever interact with a Christian in that kind of way or get on their turf, because if I get on their turf, then I'm going to lose my faith.
Yeah.
100%. They're going to convince me otherwise.
Because we're working for the devil, and that's our whole goal, right?
Well, it's not that you're working for the devil. They do believe that all Christians have good intentions. They have righteous intentions. They're trying to follow the God that they know, but they're missing the fullness of the gospel. It's that missing link. The reason why everybody hasn't already joined the Mormon church is because of the power of Satan to convince them to not listen to the missionaries when they knock on your door, to convince them to believe the things that are actually true about church history that the church has covered up and said never happened. If they would say
our minds are blind.
Yeah,
which is exactly what we would say.
Evil. It's that the Christian body outside of Mormonism is deceived, therefore is the whore of all the earth.
Yeah, like you're the pastor, but you're the blind leading the blind.
You're doing your best.
Yeah, you're just so misled.
I would say that is actually accurate. I'm doing my best here, man. But I didn't know. I mean, we've always called it the Grove. I didn't know it was like this, back language of the whore of all the earth. That would explain a lot. But
sorry to ruin your day.
I know, but it makes me kind of laugh because it's like I can now see like these Mormon folks or LDS, or I'm not supposed to say that, but would be like, bless his heart, like bless his little heart. He's trying, but he's leading all these people astray because he's astray.
Yeah.
Wow.
And sitting here right now, any believing member of the church who will watch this are shuddering right now because they think that you have ensnared us in Christianity.
Well,
so
let me assure them I'm not that good. I can't even get my kids to go to bed on time. You think I can talk them out of years of Mormonism and get out?
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
But anyways, go ahead and keep going.
Okay, so at this point what would you call it? We had a little tiny flip,
like a light bulb moment
of our brains. Like, well, we had been told this is the true church. You are members of the true church. You are so blessed to be born and raised in the one true church on earth. Never question it. But we had this little moment of like, God, if I'm wrong, show us where we're wrong.
Wow.
And
was that scary?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Wow.
And it wasn't immediate, but we were thinking like this and praying and genuinely humbly asking for answers and truth.
Before you go any further, to put that in context, I think that would be anybody that's listening that is of the Christian faith, sitting down at their kitchen table with their Bible out going, maybe I got it wrong. And like, if you put that into a perspective, like, I can't imagine that moment, right? Because then you would be calling into question everything that you believe. You'd be calling into question your faith, who God is.
Everything was up for debate. If God
Everything.
exists.
If he exists, and if this is true, if this is not true, wow, I can't imagine that moment.
In fact, from the time that the president of the church, I'm just going to say.
We can't call him a prophet anymore.
Yeah. Ever since he...
You're not allowed?
No,
Oh,
I just...
you won't.
We choose to not call him a prophet anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe the edict had went out.
Not
You're
allowed
not
to.
allowed to.
No.
But from the time he sent out that letter about the pharmaceutical, right?
Yeah.
Ever since then, I was telling her, I'm like, I don't know what to do. If the church isn't true, then God can't be real. That's what I would constantly say. Like,
right.
if the church isn't true, God cannot be real.
Which is what 80%
I don't want to
of the
accept
people
the fact
that
that God's
leave.
not real.
Because that's how hard the indoctrination is.
Yeah.
But God spoke to me, and he's like, thank you for being humble. I'm going to like you open the door, and I'm
Here I come.
here I come. And so it's funny that God used this verse. So the whole Mormon history starts with Joseph Smith when he's a young boy going to pray to God.
Which I have so many questions about that and how y'all can, but we
can go into all that later.
Part
We
two,
will,
yes.
But
yes,
I'll do
let's not
just
go
this
there.
one little part is the whole story starts because Joseph Smith was inspired by James 1:5 that said, if you lack wisdom, ask of God and he'll give you liberally. And so God just brought that to my mind, and he's like, Joseph Smith prayed to ask, why don't you? I'll anything you ask me, I will give you the answer. And I was like, okay, never really questioned anything, any specific doctrine or anything. I didn't have any deep burning, doubts or questions, but I'm like, all right, I will find something to ask you. And part of the Mormon indoctrination is it's highly discouraged to read or look at anything outside of the church literature because it's anti-Mormon. And so anything that ex-members or non-members would say about church history or church doctrine is anti-Mormon.
Okay.
And
Including outdated Mormon texts that they no longer want to adhere.
Yeah. And so I was still kind of in that mind frame, like, okay, well, I'm only going to look for answers within the scriptures, like the Bible and the Book of Mormon and anything within, like the church has an app where they have all their scriptures and all of any literature they put out, manuals, or is in an app called the Gospel Library. And so when I would pray to ask God, like, okay, I want to know this, I would only look for the answers within the Gospel Library app, all church literature, and God showed me all of these false doctrines that I could see right in the scriptures and right in all of the church literature.
Right there in front of you.
Yeah. It's
In
just
broad
hiding in
daylight.
plain sight. Yeah.
Was that kind of a daunting thing, though? Because I'm thinking, here's little old Karli coming from generations of Mormonism, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is what the official name is, I guess. And you're going up against this huge machine, this religious machine.
And it wasn't just a religion, it was a culture, it was a lifestyle.
It was your life.
It was your identity.
Yes. Yeah. Whoa. Oh my gosh, that had to be scary and humbling.
Yeah. No, it was. And but for me it was like light bulb moment, like all of a sudden I've got a whole new perspective and I'm just like, thank you, Jesus. Like you said, if I ask questions, you will show me anything. I started asking more and more questions and I'm very analytical. Like I love doing deep dive research. And so I went and found like all of the history of all these certain doctrines. And he would show me in the scriptures and everything, how it's false. And then along the way, part of the Mormon temple is, so anyone who goes on a mission or gets married in the temple, they start wearing these garments, they're called. And it's the underwear you wear. So you covenant to wear this special underwear for the rest of your life.
Describe what.
When you say underwear, you mean like
a
like
t-shirt.
real underwear?
It's an
Underwear.
undershirt, like a t-shirt, and long shorts. It's all
Like
white.
boxer briefs that go just above your knee.
And you
for
wear them
women
under
and
your
men.
jeans or whatever.
That's like your
sure.
covenant to God.
Every
It's
day.
like, yeah. And so that's,
Unless you're doing an activity that can't be reasonably done with the garment.
yeah, like you
Swimming,
take them off to swim and stuff.
showering.
But yeah, you wear them your whole life. And so we'd been wearing these for like 9 years or something since our missions, and never doubted it, of course. But all of a sudden after.
You're not even allowed to like fall asleep without them on. Like if you wake up in the morning and you had fallen asleep without your garments on, then I would spend hours repenting in the morning.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding.
Not everyone is like that.
But I was that
but
Mormon.
I get, you
Yeah.
were that Mormon.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all of a sudden, so after God started to wake me up and he had already showed me some false doctrine. And I was like, wow, look at that. I was like, show me more, God. And so all of a sudden, after I'd like take a shower or whatever and put on my clothes in the morning, I'd put on my fresh pair of garments and I would have a visceral reaction.
Really?
I'd feel sick to my stomach and like nauseous, like something's wrong with what I'm wearing. Like, why do I feel like this? Like, what is wrong with these garments?
Holy garments.
The holy garments. And so that was my next research. And I dove into all these scriptures and the church literature, what they say about them, where they came from, why they're significant. And God, again, showed me all within the church approved resources why they were false doctrine and not required by God at all. And so we threw them out.
That's okay. I just got to pause there because I'm sure our listeners are thinking what I'm thinking. Like, y'all had holy underwear?
Yeah, they
Like,
were called
that's what
the
I'm-
holy garment.
Yes. Yeah. I'm thinking, oh my gosh. Like, did y'all have like a special store you ordered them from? I know that sounds silly, but
Oh yeah, from
they
the
were
church.
Yeah.
They were made out
They
of certain.
were
Anywhere-
$3 to $6.50 per piece. So you would spend on average between $6 and $12 per pair.
Yeah.
could
I
only
think
get through
anywhere
the
there's a
church.
temple, there's a church outlet store, whatever. I don't remember. It was a distribution center. So anywhere there's a temple, there's a distribution center where you,
You know
can
what's
buy
unfortunate,
garments.
and then this is probably inappropriate, but you know I'm trying my hardest here. But underwear's come a long way since the Mormons started, and I feel so bad for some of these guys that's been living in this holy garment for 80 years.
Especially the women, because you have to cover them.
Oh my gosh!
So you try and be a woman and find shorts that go past your knees.
well,
In 2024.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, they own the market on that.
Yeah,
But
100%.
Well, and it's funny because they're supposed to be that strict. Like they're supposed to go to your knees. Like there's even a little embroidered mark that's the knee, like the mark on your knee, and it's significant to prayer, whatever, remind you to pray. And so it's supposed to be on your knee. But now, like, people in the church are getting a little bit more progressive and stuff, and a lot of members are becoming a little bit more lax with it. Like, okay, well, you don't actually have to wear them all the time, even though we promised in the temple we'd wear them all the time.
Yes.
And so, and they make different sizes, like petite sizes. Like I'm 5 feet tall. Like I would get the petite size, and it would still go all the way to my knee, and I'd
Can't
have to
imagine how
cover
you
that.
could wear your clothes over top of this without it just being like an absolute weird. Like, I mean, I've got my underwear on. You know what I'm saying?
doesn't look
You
great.
can't modify them. You can't roll them up a little bit if they're too
No,
long.
but now
gosh.
they do.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, like I got a little bit judgmental about it because I would wear my petite garments to my knees and have to cover them to my knees. Like I couldn't even wear this little shirt dress because it's not long enough.
No.
But then these other women,
115-degree weather.
that's another
summer
thing.
in St. George.
I was
yeah.
9 months pregnant in 115-degree St. George wearing these every day.
Well,
I almost died of heat stroke every time I went outside with
you
my
know,
kids.
in Arizona, they just came off at like a major. Not that this matters to our conversation, but they had the longest recorded over 100-day weather in Arizona recently. So, I mean, God saved y'all from that underwear I mean, just in time.
I'm like,
Yeah,
it could have been a year earlier.
The
I would have.
humidity's worse, by the way.
Oh,
we would have
man.
for sure died out here.
It would have been nice a year earlier if I didn't have to wear
and
those
for the
pregnant.
Christians out there that are listening that are entrepreneurs, we're killing it on shirts. I've got a Christian sweatshirt on, bracelets. There's a market for underwear.
Holy
you know,
underwear.
come on, holy underwear, bro. Let's get
Yeah.
it. People are
Have
willing to
talk
wear
Tyler
it.
about that.
Yeah.
See if we can get
Tyler,
something
can we
going.
get some Grove underwear?
Yeah.
All right, so all this stuff starts happening, and let's kind of move forward here before we pause this conversation to get into part 2. And we'll get more into those because that's so fascinating. Like that's just a drop in the bucket of what y'all were supposed to do.
Yeah.
But then you had a conversion experience to Jesus Christ, right? It's along this way. Tell me about it.
Well, there's always a storm before the calm.
Oh, and there was
So-
a very big, long storm.
So as soon as God was telling us these truths and started opening our eyes, we started sharing it a little bit, and it was evident. And I wouldn't do anything
Not in an
like
adversarial
no,
way, just in
Like
hey,
with your
think about
friends?
this.
like on Facebook, we'd post like, "Hey, this scripture and this scripture seem to be contradictory," and I would open
That
up.
had to be a no-no, though.
Oh no!
Huge.
So the backlash. Dallin's going to talk about the backlash.
Yeah, can we get into that a little
Yeah,
bit?
please.
Okay,
Tell me about
that's a pretty crucial part of the
Yes.
story. Now, the garments were a breaking point. I had my own experience when she first brought up that she was going to throw away her garments. I freaked out.
It was on our
I'm like-
anniversary too.
I'm like, how am I going to convince her? Like, and I told her, I'm like, let's just go back to church. Let's go ahead first. Let's get the jab, whatever we got to do,
Yeah.
to get right with God again. Like, if you're talking about taking off your garments, then we're getting divorced or something,
Because
like
that's
this
part of
isn't
our
good.
temple's covenants that get us into heaven, and so it's serious.
So I have
You know,
my
I
own.
counsel with people. Like, that's what I do. Here, this is a new one for me as far like the argument that y'all are having in Utah in your home. It's over
Yeah.
your
It was
garments.
actually in Vegas on our
Oh,
anniversary. Shouldn't have gone to Vegas.
I mean,
That
you
was
could
our
go
first
to Vegas,
mistake.
just take those holy underwear with you.
Yeah, but one point I want to touch on really
Yeah,
quick
please.
is they have these symbols on them
Oh, okay.
that mean different things, and you're taught that they are representative of all these holy things. But I was God kind of guided me down a rabbit hole of discovering that it's the square and the compass from Freemasonry. And so much of the temple related stuff is copycat Freemasonry. It was when I realized that I actually threw mine away first, and I told her, and she's like, "Are you kidding me?" And she freaking goes and
I was trying to be sensitive to him. I told him I was questioning, like God was putting this on my heart to pray about it, and he was freaking out. So I was like, "I'm not going to throw him out yet. I'll wait till you're comfortable." And he threw him out before I did.
But when we did that, when we threw away our garments, that was the moment. I mean, questioning was our first mistake according to the Mormon ideology, but throwing away our garments was the moment that we committed ourselves to hell. Or as Mormons call it, it's outer darkness. They don't call it hell. It's just the dark place where Satan lives, that all of the people who leave Mormonism who once believed in it go. No one else goes to hell except for Mormons who
Except for
leave the church.
ex-Mormons.
Really?
No one else goes to hell. Hitler, they believe, won't go to hell.
Because he wasn't in the church.
He wasn't in the church.
And
he
then
didn't have a
left the church.
perfect knowledge of the fullness of the gospel. Therefore, he can't be judged to the highest degree.
That changes things for a lot of people.
But there's 3 degrees of heaven. That's a whole other
Yeah,
thing.
oh, yeah, we'll get into that. But
We'll get into all that.
let me make sure I heard this right. For our listeners, the thing that sealed your eternal fate was throwing the underwear out?
Throwing the underwear out and choosing not. That's when we stopped going to church. That's when I was done. But this is really, really shaky water. This is dangerous water because now we don't know what we're stepping into. We just know that what we've previously believed is a lie. We don't know what was true, what was false. We didn't know if all. At this point, I'm hoping God's still real, but I just don't know.
Yeah.
I'm hoping God won't punish me like I was always raised to believe he would if I ever left, but I just don't know.
You know what's crazy is because we make a joke about it now. You can laugh about it now, and it still baffles me. But there's a whole symbolism of you taking those garments off and going, no more. Like, what had you wrapped up? What had you encompassed? What had you feeling secure? The whole thing. You're finally shaking it off, right?
What was shielding us from truth.
That's right. You've shaken it off, and now you're at ground zero of going, we got to figure this out. Is it all wrong? Is it sort of wrong? Is it whatever it is? You know, and that's where you're entering into. Now, let me say a side note. There's literally people still that think when you get to hell, because that's where they think you're going,
Outer darkness.
The outer darkness.
Yeah.
That when they ask, "What are you in for?" You're gonna say, "I threw out my underwear."
Yeah. That
Like
was the
to me,
crime.
I'm like, God's got bigger issues, man.
Yeah.
You know,
Not in Mormonism.
but not
you don't.
Mormonism. I had no clue. This is blowing my mind. But I'm trying my best here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, okay, now we're on shaky ground. This is like an earthquake. This is huge in your faith. Boom.
So this is when all of a sudden many of the neighbors who lived close to us started to act really weird. Started to kind of hold us at a distance. They kind of stopped letting their kids, play. Some of them moved away. I don't know that that's necessarily correlated.
They moved
it
one
was.
block away.
Yeah,
Really?
But
2
it was
blocks.
strange, and whatever, to each their own. They had a pretty sweet house that they moved to. But everything got weird. Family started reaching out.
Started being shunned a little. Is that what you would
Yeah.
say?
Family started reaching out with disappointment. A lot of people just started acting awkward around me. Like they couldn't really talk to me because like I'm kind of dangerous now.
Yeah, I mean, you're dangerous. You ain't got underwear on.
The biggest thing that happened. So not only am I now entering an entire identity crisis, a full-fledged multidimensional identity crisis, but on top of that, my mom had been along the same wavelengths that we were, in studying the church, and she took her garments off, stopped wearing them, and started following really closely with what we were doing. We were both sharing things back and forth, and we were walking that journey with my mom. When my mom finally decided to throw away her garments and officially leave the church, my dad flipped out. Now, my dad was never really the most orthodox Mormon. I mean, he believed in the church. He raised us with good values. But he was far from being, the. You know what I mean? He was,
Yeah.
He
I mean,
chose
yeah, but he wasn't extreme like you.
No,
would
he
often
cherry-picked what
accuse
he
me
wanted
of
to
being
do, too.
self-righteous.
Yeah.
Okay. So that kind of energy. Well, he flipped out. My parents and my mom ended up having to leave him over it.
And he'd already been in the church, out of the church, back in the church.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
My whole life, he would stop going, start going again, and whatever.
But he had the
but-
biggest problem with it so far.
Yeah,
like on your
because
side.
I think he realized that it was the church and the doctrines of eternal families, eternal marriage, which we'll get into later. But it was those doctrines that held the family together, that kept their marriage together, that should have ended decades ago. I mean, really.
It was a very
toxic marriage.
Yeah.
So my mom finally leaves. She had nowhere to go. We had a lot in common. We offered for her to stay with us, with my 2 little brothers who were at home. And anyways, she ends up leaving. We let her move in with us short term. And that's when, our family had been, my family, I should say, had been really reaching out and like calling us out publicly and doing things like that. But when my dad left the church, when my mom left the church and left my dad and we supported her, we were completely exiled from our family. So now I'm in a multi-dimensional identity crisis. My family has completely done away with me. I don't have a dad. I don't have his entire side of the family.
And that was like the only family we had, too.
Yeah, and ironically, what it all came down to is I'm like, why would you believe what my dad's saying over me? Like, we've always been close. You've always trusted me over my dad. Now, all of a sudden, you don't. My cousin literally told me, well, Dallin, it's kind of hard to trust what you're saying these days after you left the church, And so it really came down to us leaving the church. So I end up getting...
And you had already been ostracized from your family.
Yeah, well, no, so my family didn't. My family was different. I still got backlash from his family. When I started sharing things like these scriptures are contradictory, it was another one of his cousins that was commenting on my post like, you are clearly confused and you should just keep your opinions to yourself. And then he went and made a whole Facebook post about basically me leaving the church and stuff.
He was sharing his opinion.
Yes, his opinion. Yes.
But telling you to keep yours to yourself.
Yeah, it's funny. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was all his family. Mine was very different.
These guys.
Yeah, I really only got backlash from my mom, who would write books in the comments arguing with me. But that was really the only backlash from my family.
So now you're ostracized. Now you don't know who you are. Your identity is just shattered. And rather being received and talking through it and helping you along, they cut it off, send you out, you're done. What happens?
Yeah, so what happened next was I've always been very prone to anxiety. From the time I was a kid, I remember just having uncontrollable anxiety. I'd have these intrusive thoughts and just go on these spiral anxiety episodes, where I'd have a hard time controlling my anxiety,
Yeah.
and this exploded. I could not, when I tell you for a year and a half, I did not find a moment of peace.
Wow.
For a year and a half, I did not feel a moment of peace.
But now listen, I think this is because we talked about this just a little bit. Part of that would be perceived from the Mormon Church is God's punishing you, right? You're
100%.
not going to have peace because you left the one true church. So He's trying to get your attention, and He's
Yes.
basically choking you out, dude.
Well, and I believed the whole time, right, up until very recently. I believed deep down that either God wasn't real, and I was holding on to the belief that He was. But if He was real, as our life fell apart, and we'll get into that, our life fell apart big time. Somehow I believed, because I had been so brainwashed, that the same God who led me out of the church was the God who is now punishing me for leaving. And it was this contradictory nightmare. But I held on to a faith and a trust that the God that I always believed in was real, that He was there, that somehow, some way it would work out, we would be okay. But you got to think, we're living in Utah. Every street corner has a Mormon church on it. There's 2 Mormon temples to every town in Utah. And we're constantly being reminded by all this. We're constantly interacting with Mormons. And as soon as they kind of sense that we're ex-Mormons, that's the term.
Is that what an Exmo?
Yeah, ex-Mo.
That's cool.
As soon as they would sense that we're ex-Mormon, they would kind of start distancing themselves. I fell into a very dark period of time of deep depression, serious anxiety, so much so that between that, the divorce that my parents were going through, where my dad was trying to strip my mom of her own rights to see my brothers, all of this is happening inside the walls of my home. I'm completely losing control. I'm trying to hold on to the core beliefs that I had, but trying to figure out what I needed to separate from. I was running at the time, very successful business, a finished carpentry and painting construction business. And at the time that I left the church, I was balling. I mean,
You had it.
we were living rather lavishly.
You had just expanded, gotten
I
a
had
new
just
paint
made
van, all
some
this
new
stuff.
hires, bought a bunch of, we were ready to go vertical on this company. And it was on that trajectory.
I don't know. You were balling. I don't know what you say outside the Mormon Church. Outside the Mormon Church, what we say is you big pimping.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure, you were rolling, baby.
Yeah. But the depression and anxiety began to take over, and I could not juggle my parents' divorce, writing the affidavits in court that I was having to write to defend my mom.
You kidding me?
Having to go through everything that we went through, and my business began to fall apart. I didn't have the energy to go out there and find new business. I didn't have the mental strength to handle business and get things.
Were you
taken
finding
care
it
of.
even when you did find a little bit of strength? Were you probably not received as a business as well now that you've left the church?
There was a little bit of that.
A little bit?
There was, yeah. There was a little bit of definitely some resistance and pullback
It
that I could
affected
sense.
every aspect of your life.
Yeah, and ultimately by the end of that year, so about 6 months later, it was, my business was toast. It was over. I knew it. Everyone knew it. I was just biding my time, starting to rack up credit card debt to try and save it, trying to keep my employees employed, who I loved more than, they were amazing employees. I would give anything to this day to have a second chance at having them as employees, working with them. They were fantastic. And ultimately, as soon as we realized that my business was on its way out, there was no saving it. And there could have been, right? If I knew what I know now, there could have been. But we started thinking okay, we're miserable. We're hating this life that we're in. We're hating living in Utah. We hate all of the reminders of everything that we're trying to separate from. And most importantly, we started to realize what happens when your kids get closer and closer to the age of 8, which is when all Mormons are supposed to be baptized. The church is going to start indoctrinating them. Their friends, if they are allowed to hang out with friends, they're going to be trying to invite them to church and to slowly coerce them into the church. And it's a common practice with missionaries and many members of the Mormon church that you target the kids, get the kids in slowly to the point where the kid wants to be baptized, and then the parents oftentimes will come into the church with them, and that's how you get the parents. And so
I wanted to talk on that for a minute, before our big decision, because we started seeing how people in Utah treat people who leave the church. Yeah. And so, of course, like we said, like we had friends stop talking to us. And then our next door neighbors, the whole 2.5 years we lived in St. George, our next door neighbors were awesome people from California, just normal Christians. They had 2 great kids. Like their boys were so nice. They had great friends.
Great kids.
Their best friends were Mormons, like in our neighborhood. But as soon as we left the church, the neighborhood and all the Mormons started treating them differently too. Because here's the thing, when we left, nobody came and asked us, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Like, why did you leave? They don't ask that. They just gossip around and start thinking what they want to think about us. Like we wanted to sin or something. And so
that's a favorite line.
You just want to sin?
Yeah, we just want to sin.
Hey, I'm thinking about leaving the church because
Yeah.
I want to sin.
So they got it in their minds that it was because of these Christian neighbors that we were good friends with, that they were the bad influence that corrupted us and made us want to leave the church. So without any evidence of this, they started ostracizing that family and their kids.
Because they're friends with you?
Yeah.
They eventually had to leave Utah over all of
They
it.
they had to leave Utah because their kids were no longer invited to
Completely cut
anything.
out. Like they would show up to a neighborhood block party with all their friends there, and one of the parent ladies literally turned them away and said, "Sorry, you boys aren't invited."
And they were the nicest boys. Like it's like making me choke up thinking about it.
Unbelievable.
It was unbelievable.
My gosh. And there's people that sign up to voluntarily act this way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like that's what this belief system is going to do.
It takes a long time of indoctrination to get to that point where you treat people that way. But ultimately,
they run people out of the state, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we knew we didn't want to raise our kids in this environment.
No kidding.
That they would be treated like that.
And my mental health was quickly failing. I mean, I was on a crash course.
You were hanging on by a thread, bro.
Yeah.
So Jesus starts working. Y'all leaving.
We decided we had to get out of Utah.
Yeah.
So I started looking all over the country for a job. The first place that we immediately thought that we wanted to go to was exactly where we are.
Here?
Eastern Tennessee. That's
Even
where
before all this
talked for years
happened, we're
about
like,
moving.
even before all this happened, we both separately had little thoughts like, hey, if we ever leave St. George, like we love
going
St. George.
straight for
We never
Tennessee.
thought we'd leave St. George, but hey, if we ever do, I like Tennessee. Sure, me too.
Well,
like we just had
That's
that
all we
thought.
wanted. But we couldn't find jobs.
You know, I don't know how to tell you this, and I'm not a prophet, so you don't have to believe everything I say. But of all the states, Tennessee is God's favorite.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, he told me that. He told me to tell you that, and you can't question it. Don't question that. I'm just kidding. So okay, so now but before you got to Tennessee, you went somewhere else, right?
Yeah. So at the time, we're like, okay, we got to get out of Tennessee, and our mindset was wherever we're supposed to go, God will provide a way. He'll provide me with a job and an opportunity. So I was literally traveling around here. I went to visit. We have some really good friends who lived right here in Kingston. That's how we got connected with all this, which is just amazing.
Which is crazy.
But I came out and visited them. We're looking for jobs. I was hustling. I mean, I was walking resumes in old school style.
You're
shaking
still
hands.
hustling though, bro.
Say what?
Like you're still hustling.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like you that's in you. Like you do awesome. But go ahead. You're walking resumes in.
But I wasn't making any connections. I was getting some interviews, but they just weren't quite clicking. And I ended up we had a distant friend through my mom who was a pastor in Orlando, Florida. And when I was at kind of a breaking point in Utah, I was like, I need to experience like what a Christian church feels like outside of Utah. And so I flew out for their Easter Sunday, their Easter weekend thing. And they did services 3 days in a row. They did all these celebrations and events. It was so fun. And I went there and I had a huge, conversion moment where I started to get it. In that weekend, I started to see that there was something beyond what I knew. It wasn't about what I had to cut out of my old beliefs. It was the idea of I needed to pursue a true knowledge of who God really is.
Wow.
Like I need to completely not give up on God, not throw it all away, but I need to humble myself, accept the fact that I may have been deceived on every level of everything I once believed. And I had to walk in faith into a new church and start to learn who God really was.
Dude, do you know when you say that how brave that is? I know at the time you're kind of despondent, you're down, you're desperate, you're Your family is shaken to its core. You and your wife are hanging on to each other. You're trying to raise babies. Utah's all you know. And you're like, I'm getting on this plane and I'm going to church. I'm going to church. Like, I can't get people to drive 10 minutes. So you fly across country and you walk in. That may be one of the bravest faith things I've ever heard of. Like, that's unbelievable to me.
I
That's
appreciate
crazy.
that.
I mean, I'm being honest, because most of us around here, we don't have, our faith isn't challenged like that. You know, like, we get mad around here in the South. You get mad over the color of the ceiling, or, you know, what color the walls are, or how long the preacher preaches. And you're like, try having your whole life taken from you.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they did everything but take your life. I mean, really.
Yeah.
They took all your friends. They took all your family was
And they
destroyed.
almost took that too.
They almost did.
Yeah.
Right. And we're going to get into this, because to me, this is where I get angry for you. All of that is, and we've made jokes, but this thing gets really dark, because these, and I don't know the folks that you know by face and name, but this thought process, literally, because you said, hey, I don't think this is right. They would have been, in my opinion, more satisfied if you ceased to exist than if you found truth.
This is the real dark truth. And I've come to realize this more and more. The more people who reach out, still trying to save my soul and still trying to convince me I'm on a dark path and all that stuff, the more that happens, the more I realize that the church and many of my friends, family members, people that I once were my family, everything to me, they would have rather see me completely apostatize from God than find Christianity and find happiness outside of the church. You're not supposed to find happiness outside of the church. You're not supposed to find a faith in God outside of the church, because the church is the only way. And
but you do find it outside the church, and that's
you find
where
it quickly.
Yeah, and that's where this story really takes off.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's pause right now, and we'll come up with the second part of this, because this is a lot to digest.
It
and
is.
now we're just getting to the juicy part where Jesus enters the
best part.
picture. Yeah. Radically changes your life. But the blowback is still yet to come in a lot of ways.
Oh, yes.
in the cost that you paid.
I haven't come close to hitting rock bottom yet.
No, and it's coming. So I want us to pause and let all of our listeners know that we will have part 2 coming very soon. You guys are so brave. Like, you're some of my heroes. And I know I'm out in Utah, just bless your heart to me. But what you've done and how far you've come is a testimony to the work of God in your life, like even when you were blinded, but also to what he's about to do to lead to you helping others. Because where Dallin and Karli are now, there are people sitting where you were that need a lifeline, that are scared. And you guys have faced, what I call, and y'all sit through this series, but you've stared down some lions, like some real ones. And here you are on the other side. You're still getting through it. Like, you're still bleeding a little bit, but you're on the healing process. And it's going to go to transform other people's life. And I'm just thankful to know you. I can't, this is a funny way to end this thing, but the day I met y'all at church, like, you came down and you're cute and 5 foot nothing and whatever. I didn't know you'd had this whole underwear battle before I met you. And then Dallin comes down and he's like this sick looking, cool, hip dude. I love the arm sleeve. I'm considering it myself. And you introduce, I would have never thought you were from Utah. I would have never thought you were Mormon. And you were like, hey, we're former Mormons. We're in church. Y'all were complimentary to me. And we kind of struck it up, and I didn't think another thing about it, like where this would lead the story. But I said, I'd love to hear your story. We started talking. But let me tell you what, when I walked out of church that day, there was a lot of things that happened. And I went home and told my wife, I was like, you're not going to believe it, but I met these former Mormons and they're awesome, And out of all the darkness that you came, there was other people here. And I know you're going to kind of share that. But as much as they wanted you to be out or done or decimated, there's a whole group of people that just want to open our arms and go, dude, we love you. And I don't even know you yet, but the future's bright. And
you guys have done that. And I just got to say that the Grove has played a huge, I would say, the most massive role in helping us to find peace in our newfound faith.
Well, you're awful kind with that, and but this story is from where you live now to the baptism to all these things are just a whole group of people, the hands and feet of Jesus that surrounded you, that I want you to tell that story about. But let's do that next time. Is that cool with y'all?
Yep.
So y'all come back, we'll do this. This has been Tales from the Other Side. We're not even, guys, if y'all been listening to this, just keep refreshing that podcast because we're going to drop this next one. And you're going to want to hear all this stuff. But I love you, and we'll talk soon. Thanks. Bye.